Presentation. We'll start off with an overview of the Duolingo English test and of Duolingo itself. We'll talk a bit about the accepting institutions and programs for the Duolingo English test. We'll look at the flow of the test, some of the different test questions. We'll look at how you get the results, how your answers are scored. We'll talk about security and proctoring, how you can set up your space at home for doing the test, the rules and requirements for doing the test, and what resources we provide you for getting ready for the test. Let's start off then with an overview of the test, but before that, a quick overview of Duolingo. So Duolingo's mission is to make education accessible for all. And one way that we do that is through the language learning app, which is available in 40 different languages. It's been named the app of the year before on iTunes and Google Play. It's the most downloaded educational app, and at the moment over 500 million people use the app to learn languages. One of our products at Duolingo is the Duolingo English test. Now, the idea behind this test is that we believe that tests should be a bridge and not a barrier. And that's why we launched the Duolingo English test around 5 years ago. The test is the first high-stakes, completely online or only online exam that's out there. It uses the latest assessment science and AI, and it's designed with test takers in mind. It's convenient, fast, and affordable, and at the moment it's accepted by over 4,000 university programs around the world. So let's look at some of the main features of the test. Instantaneously with as many institutions as you like. The test is also affordable. It's only $49 a time, and included in that price, you can send your results, as I said, to an unlimited number of accepting institutions. The test is also accurate. It uses the latest assessment science and AI to ensure that the test is reliable and secure. Much more about that later. And on that page on our website, you can search either by the name of the institution or by the country or by the program type. Make sure though that you click through to find the latest details from the universities themselves. Next, we're going to talk about accepting institutions, so that's schools and universities that accept Duolingo English test as part of their entrance requirements. So you can see that at the moment there are over 4,000 programs which accept the Duolingo English test. It's at the end of 2022. And you can see that the biggest growth came in 2020 during the pandemic. But even since the pandemic finished, more and more schools have accepted the Duolingo English test as part of their entrance requirements. The Duolingo English test is accepted by many of the top universities around the world. You might notice some famous names from different countries on the map below. Places like Yale, Macquarie, UCLA, Carnegie Mellon, Columbia, etc. So next, I'm going to take you through 4 of the top countries in the world whose universities accept the test. So number 1 is the USA. Over 100 top universities accept the test, including the top 25 US universities for international students. And in total, there are over 3,000 undergraduate programs across all 50 states in the US that accept the Duolingo English test. Next is Canada. So Canada has over 330 undergraduate and postgraduate programs which accept the Duolingo English test, and that includes 14 of the 15 top universities in Canada. The Duolingo English test is also good for studying in the UK. Over 180 undergraduate and postgraduate programs across the UK, as you can see from the list below, accept the test. And there are over 70 undergraduate and postgraduate programs across Australia which accept the Duolingo English test. Now, to find out if your specific university that you want to apply to is accepted, then check at englishtest.duolingo.com/institutions. There you can search by country or by program type or by university and find out if your university that you want to apply to is on the list. Next then, let's look at the test flow. So here's a timeline of the Duolingo English test. The testing itself takes around an hour. You can obviously take the test from your computer whenever you're ready and whenever you are feeling like you're at the top of your game. The certification takes just 2 days. That means within that time, the test results get reviewed by both AI and real human proctors working remotely. And at the end, after those 2 days, when you get your results, you'll be able to share them with an unlimited number of institutions. So let's look at the test flow within the test. The setup's very quick. It usually takes around 5 minutes to go through the rules of the test and check that all your hardware is working properly. The next part is the adaptive test. So that's about 45 minutes. And in that time, you'll get asked a variety of different questions. And the final 10 minutes is the writing and speaking samples. And those pieces of work after the test, you'll be able to send those along with your score to accepting institutions, and they will help those institutions get to know you and your English proficiency a bit better. The Duolingo English test is a computer adaptive test. So that means that our AI draws on a large number of potential questions, and it makes decisions about which questions to ask you based on how well you've done on previous questions in the test. That means both that the testing experience is much faster than traditional tests, and also that no two tests are the same. So that's both because the test is adaptive and because we've got a large number of different questions. Before getting into that part of the test though, we have the quick setup. So that's where initially you'll test your computer's browsers, speaker and microphone. More later on what it is and isn't okay to use for that. You'll also take a picture of yourself, and using your ID, you'll enter your personal information, and we'll give you a quick overview of all the test rules to make sure that you're familiar with what you can and can't do during the test. So next, let's get into the different test questions that there are in the Duolingo English test. Next, let's look at how the Duolingo English test questions might be different from other tests you might have taken in the past. Well, first of all, the questions are very efficient. Science, and you'll see narrative and expository examples of writing as well. The questions get administered randomly, so that means that no two test takers will get the same questions on the same test, and the large pool of questions that we have means that everyone is really getting a unique test experience. So let's dive in and look at some of the different question types here. One is called completing a passage. Read and complete, this one is called. So you can see here that there's a passage. There are parts of words missing. You need to read the passage and complete the words. We also have vocabulary questions like these, read and select and listen and select, where test takers need to select the real English words from the list. So only choose the words that you already know that are real words. We also have typing and speaking statements. So on the left is listen and type. So that's a dictation. You'll hear an audio up to 3 times and you have to type what you hear. On the right is read aloud, the shortest question on the test, where you see a statement and you need to read it aloud correctly and clearly. There's also the interactive reading passages, the longest questions on the test, where you see a text and get asked different questions about the same text. You might have to fill in the blanks, choose a sentence to go between two paragraphs, highlight different parts of the answer to answer different questions, and also select a title and a main idea for the text that you've read. There's also questions about describing images, like write about the photo and speak about the photo, where you'll see an image and you need to describe the photo, but go beyond simple labeling of the image and try and describe it in detail. And there's also some longer open response questions, like read then write, or read then speak and listen then speak, where you get a prompt and you need to either write extensively about it or speak extensively about it. And at the end of the test, as we mentioned earlier, there are the writing and speaking samples. So for those, you get given a question, you need to either write or speak on that question for an extended period of time. And after the test, those videos, if it's the speaking or the text from your writing, will be sent to the institutions that you apply to. And that's a way for them to get to know you and your English better than just looking at a score sheet. Below are some top tips on how you can get the best possible score on the Duolingo English test. Firstly, be prepared to show off your very best English skills. So remember that this is a test and we want you to speak naturally, but also try and use the best English that you can. It might help to imagine that you are speaking to or writing to a professor at the university that you're applying to. So try and use slightly more formal and more advanced English than perhaps you would in an everyday conversation. Next, use all the time that you have, right? So some of the writing questions, for example, you get up to 5 minutes. Use all of that time to check and edit your work. So you won't have things like spell checkers. You'll need to do all that editing yourself. So make the most of that time. Next, if you don't know an answer, you can just guess, right? So we don't penalize you for getting answers wrong. It's okay just to guess. And if you make a mistake, that's okay. Just keep going. Don't get distracted by mistakes. For speaking questions, you can't go back and re-record. So just keep going, keep calm and carry on. Next, make sure that you stay relevant to the topic. So one of the things that test takers are graded on is the relevance of their answer. So make sure that you answer the questions that you get asked. And finally, speak and write naturally in your own voice. Don't memorize big chunks of language or try to remember things that you've read somewhere else, perhaps from a preparation course. Those will not help you get a higher score. Let's move on then to talk about the results and how your test answers get scored. So our open-ended questions get scored using an AI-powered grading engine. Okay, so for each answer that you give, it will be graded by 6 to 7 different aspects. So these are below, you can see grammatical accuracy and grammatical complexity. So the first one, grammatical accuracy, just is, are there any mistakes in your answer in terms of grammar? Grammatical complexity is, are you able to use some less common or more complex grammar in your answers? Next is lexical sophistication. So are you able to use precise, specific, and low frequency vocabulary words when necessary? And also lexical diversity. That just means, are you repeating yourself using the same words over and over again, or are you able to avoid repeating yourself? Next is task relevance. So are your answers actually answering the question that you've been asked? Fluency looks at how much you're able to say or write in a short time. And the last of these, acoustic features. This is only for speaking answers, looking at how clear is your pronunciation. Now, your overall test result will be on a scale from 10, that's the lowest, all the way up to 160, and these are given in 5-point increments. So the next score below 160 is 155. Now here's an example certificate. You can see on here at the top, there's the overall score. So this test taker got 125. And then underneath that, there's a description of what this test taker is able to do based on their performance on the test. Underneath are their sub-scores, and for each of those, a score range. And at the very bottom, a button to send the results. Now you may notice here that the sub-scores are not simply speaking, listening, reading, writing. So let's look at how those are decided. So the sub-scores for the Duolingo English test are integrated. So the 4 sub-scores are literacy, that's test takers' ability to read and write. Comprehension, that's test takers' ability to read and listen, to process input. Conversation, your ability to speak and listen. And finally, production, that's your ability to speak and write. Next, let's look at test security and proctoring. Because test takers are doing the test in their own home, there is much more responsibility than you would have doing a traditional test face-to-face. So let's look at that now. Firstly then, why is test security so important to us? Well, firstly, it's to protect you, the test taker. We want to make sure that your test is fair, accurate, and that your accomplishment, when you get a great score or you get the score that you want on the test, that gets protected. Secondly, we want to make sure that our tests are secure for universities, not just the universities and institutions that we have now, but also all of those institutions in the future should be able to trust that when they see a score for the Duolingo English test from a candidate, that they can trust that test was done fairly and equitably. And finally, we also think it's important that we set secure tests to set an example for the rest of the industry and encourage more tests to go online in the future. So let's look at some ways that we make sure the tests stay secure. Firstly, there's the design of the test, because we have so many items and because different students get different questions in every test. That means the design of the test makes it very difficult for people to remember answers or remember questions and pass them on to their friends. Secondly, we check your ID. We use a combination of other external applications.
Recording in progress.
A large number of students, like that picture at the top. But the Duolingo English test is different. We have expert human proctors observing each test session. So every student is observed by more than one proctor. And that happens asynchronously. So we use the videos of the tests afterwards to check for any rule breaking. And that's all supported by artificial intelligence, which is able to check for suspicious behavior. But important to remember that all the certification decisions are made by humans. And as we said earlier, It's really much more safe than a traditional proctoring experience where one proctor might look over several students. Here we have several proctors just looking at one student. So next, let's look at how to set up your space. If you think about going to a traditional high stakes exam, you do that in a specific place and someone would set up the examination room for you. For the Duolingo English test, along with the convenience of being able to take a test anytime, anywhere, comes a responsibility of setting up that area. So let's look at this and make sure that you can do it without making any mistakes. So firstly, let's look at some things that you need to have ready. Firstly, you need a computer. That can only be a laptop or a desktop. You cannot take the Duolingo English test on a mobile phone or a tablet. Next, you need a functioning speaker, camera, and microphone. It is okay to use external speakers, cameras, and microphones, but if you use an external microphone, make sure it's one that's not attached to a set of headphones. Next, you need a strong internet connection. So my tip is to make sure that you wait perhaps for a time of the day when the internet connection is strongest, wherever you are. And you need to make sure that you've got a well-lit, quiet, private room to do the test. And make sure that you're somewhere where you're not going to be interrupted and there's no outside noise. Make sure that you have a current valid identification. So that needs to be something like a passport, for example, or a national ID. And it's also okay to have some extra things on standby. Make sure you've got some water. If you're going to be taking the test for an hour, you'll be doing a lot of speaking. Make sure that you've got power for your laptop as well. So in terms of setting up your space, it's really important to think about the equipment that you use. So here we've got some do's and don'ts. On the left are some things that you should use. So a computer, as we said earlier, a desktop, a laptop, but not a mobile phone or a tablet. It's okay to use external cameras, microphones, and speakers. It's also okay to use those on your computer. But remember, the clearer the audio and the visual, the better, and the easier that's going to be for us to validate. You obviously need to use a keyboard and a mouse, but if you're using an external keyboard and mouse, make sure that you only use those. Don't flip between using the keyboard and the mouse on the computer and your external ones. And of course, you also need your valid ID. Remember, you cannot use headphones, you can't use cell phones or other devices. In fact, don't even have these in the same room as you. All smart devices, cell phones, tablets, smartwatches, all those things need to be off and far away from you, ideally in another room. If you've got a second monitor or a second keyboard or a second requirements, I have for you here 4 of the most commonly broken rules or the most common mistakes that test takers make while taking the test in terms of breaking rules. So let's look at those now. The most common problems that we find test takers have is not being focused on the screen, but try to keep eye contact with your computer as much as possible. Don't look off to the sides. We need to make sure, and our proctors need to make sure, that you're not getting help from outside sources. You're not looking at a vocabulary list on your wall, or you've not got a friend or family member prompting you on the other side. Of course, it's okay to occasionally glance down at the keyboard, and our proctors know that sometimes you might look away, but try to stay focused on the screen as much as possible. If you're having trouble doing this, then we really recommend that you use our free 15-minute practice test to work on this skill of keeping your eyes on the screen as much as possible. Next, you need to make sure to close all the other programs on your computer. When you're taking the Duolingo English test, the only thing that should be running on your computer should be the Duolingo English test app. So close everything else, web browsers, screen sharing, predictive text, all those things. And there shouldn't even be any programs running in the background. So before you take the test, hit Control Alt Delete. get the task manager up and close down those other programs, or you can even uninstall them. That might sound like it's going to take a long time, but it's much better than having your test disqualified because you had another program running on your computer while you were taking the test. If you were doing a test in a traditional high-stakes face-to-face environment, your mum or your friends would be allowed to come in and bring you cups of coffee, and it's for the Duolingo English test. Make sure that your test environment is private. Even if people come into the room and they're not helping you, that can still put your result in jeopardy. So make sure that when you do the test, you've got 1 full hour of uninterrupted free time. Talk to the people you live with. Make sure that they know that they're not allowed to interrupt you during that time. And remember, those interruptions include people, but they also include interruptions from devices. So make sure that you put your cell phone or your smartwatch in another room and have 1 hour of private, uninterrupted time to take the test. Final piece of advice here is to speak and write naturally. We're trying to test your real, natural English proficiency to check that when you're in a foreign country, when a professor or someone else asks you a question or talks to you, you're able to respond in the moment. Right? So do the same thing in the test. Even if you've practiced similar questions before, be specific, answer the question that you're being asked, and use your own words. That's not only important for a test security point of view, but it'll also get you a higher score in the test because, as we said earlier, task relevance, answering the question that you've been asked, is one of the things you're evaluated on in the test. So don't try and compose answers beforehand and use them because they probably won't fit the questions you're being asked. And don't use other sources. Don't memorize something that you've read online because that's plagiarism. So we just looked at the top 4 most commonly broken rules. Here are some other important ones to remember and follow. Firstly, use your own ID. Don't get someone else to do the test for you, and don't do the test for someone else. Second, make sure that your face is in the frame at all times and it's visible throughout the test. Okay, if you move out of that, your exam might get disqualified. Next, make sure that your ears are uncovered throughout the test. That's a rule for everyone unless you're wearing a head covering for a religious reason. Next, don't use any predictive text. As we mentioned earlier, you need to stop all of those programs running in the background. Of course, predictive text is a great thing to use in general, but we want to find out how good you are at writing English when you don't have predictive text. Next, make sure that your camera and microphone are on throughout the test, and don't move away from the test app during the test. You need to stay in that app the whole time during the test. Our final section in today's presentation is about readiness resources. So we refer to test readiness rather than test preparation because we believe that you don't need to do a lot of preparation to take the Duolingo English test. Anyone can do the test. But if you do want to get ready, make sure that you understand the test questions. Well, I'll introduce to you some great free resources that you can access. Firstly, there's the free practice test. This gives you a feeling for the different test questions. It's only 15 minutes long, and the URL is there at the bottom, englishtest.duolingo.com/quick. And that will also, at the end of the test, give you a rough score estimate based on your performance in the 15-minute free practice test. Next, I highly recommend that you check out the test taker guide. It's got examples of all the different questions, tips for answering the different questions in the test. It also has details on how answers get scored. You can look at sample questions, and there's information about the different rules and requirements that we've already spoken about today. You can also watch our free videos on our YouTube channel. So go over to youtube.com/Duolingo English Test. And there you'll find all sorts of information, more details about the test rules, Finally, you can look at our frequently asked questions tab on the website. Great place to review all the rules and requirements. If you've got a question, you're not sure how to solve it, we'll go there. The chances are it's already up there on the website. So that's englishtest.duolingo.com/FAQ. In summary then, the test is convenient. You can take it online, anytime, anywhere. All you need is private space and a computer and a good internet connection. The test is fast. You can complete it in an hour, get the results within 2 days after we've proctored it. It's also affordable. It's only $49 and there's no additional fees. You can share your results with as many institutions as you like. It's accurate, built on research, and of course it's accepted by over 4,000 different programs from some of the world's best universities. Thanks again for listening. For more information, go over to the website englishtest.duolingo.com. Thanks again. See you next time.
Thank you, Mr. Tondon, for the fruitful sharing about how to get a good score with Duolingo. I hope everyone here are excited to try the Duolingo test. And I hope that everyone that already watched the video have questions, yeah, that you have been prepared. And before we start the Q&A sessions, I would like to invite Mrs. Carrie Wang. Hello, Mrs. Carrie.
Hello.
Hi, hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Before we start, I would like to introduce Ms. Carrie. She is the head of the Duolingo English test and also regional business lead in Asia. Ms. Carrie was previously the director of strategy and business operations at Duolingo. She started her career as a management consultant at Bain & Company and private equity executive at KKR and Co. Is that right?
Any questions from the audience? I guess for us, I'll just share two things. One, I was also a student looking to study abroad when I was in undergrad and took many traditional exams. And remember the stress and the experience of having to pay a lot of money and go to a different city to take an English exam just to be able to study abroad. And that's really what motivated me to join Duolingo, join the Duolingo English test team to create an online test that makes testing feel less scary because you can do it at home, and also more affordable because for the price of taking 3 Duolingo tests, it's probably the same as still half of the traditional conventional test. And for us, being in Asia and serving students in countries like Indonesia is very important because that is part of our mission. We want to be able to have more people gain an English certificate and have the ability to expand your horizons abroad. So very happy to be here. I already see a lot of questions, and I need some help with picking them.
Okay, I will also invite Bu Novi. Hello, Bu Novi. Hello. Hello, Bu Novi. I will invite Bu Novi to the floor.
All right.
Hi, hello, Bu Novi.
Yes.
Since we have so many questions, so I need your hand to select one of the questions from part of the student that are really enthusiastic to ask questions. Some of them already raised their hands. So to lead the sessions, I would like to give these sessions to you and also Ms. Carrie Wang. Okay, thank you, Ms. Nabi.
Alright, so hello everyone. So I'm Noviana from Duolingo. So the first question that we already have is from, let me wait a second. It's from Fadli Faisal. This Carrie,
plenty of research. In fact, because we are accepted by the most prestigious universities in the world, from America and the UK and Australia, many of them have very high standards for choosing a test that they accept. If you're interested, you can go onto our website. There's a specific section on research that supports the Duolingo English test, and you can learn a lot more there. Following that is, I think, is a question about comparing the Duolingo English test score with traditional tests like TOEFL and IELTS. That's 100% possible on the website itself as well. There's a web page called Scores, and you would be able to look at the comparison between the Duolingo English test and these traditional tests at every band. And that should give you a very good sense of how to translate scores between tests. Final question around memorizing answers from other sources. I would say, in general, we really recommend that you don't memorize prepared answers that others have given you. There are a couple of reasons why. One, we are very strict about plagiarism, and actually overseas universities in the US and the UK are very strict about plagiarism because they want to know that your work is your own. And the way we do this is we use machine learning and artificial intelligence to compare answers between students. If you have a memorized answer, chances are someone else is also using a similar and it will make you feel very unnatural. And if you make a small mistake, because you will feel more confidence and the results will be better for you.
All right. So another question is from Joshua Julian. He's from the University of Nusa Cendana. So he asking about when we feel I know you have pointed out, but just to make sure, when we feel we make some mistakes or haven't done perfect job while giving our answer in speaking section, do we need to correct the mistake, or it's better if we can just keep on moving through to give an open response, or which one do you think will get a better score on that? And how do we decently explain an idea while talking about a certain topic, but still maintain our cool and objectivity?
This is a hard question. I can share some tips. I would say, in general, think about when you are asked to explain or respond to a question to a real person. Let's say you make a mistake, just pause and restate that word. You don't need to overly explain. You don't need to apologize. What we care about is ultimately we want to have high quality content that we can use to assess your English ability. Another reason why, as Ross mentioned earlier, why it's good to continue is you are graded on grammatical kind of diversity and lexical diversity. That means we want to see you be able to generate as much content in as a diverse set of phrases and words and ways to explain, because that helps the test assess your ability to speak English in a very expressive and expansive way. So don't stop. Don't kind of like pause for 30 seconds. Just continue to go on and explain the words you would explain otherwise. You will not get penalized for making a speaking mistake or for correcting yourself. So just continue to speak and restate the sentence if you need to.
All right. So also there's some of participants would like to have a directly question to you. So I will choose mahasiswa Presiden University Othniel Jovian.
Am I audible?
Yeah, audible.
Thank you for the opportunity. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jovan from President University. You can call me Jovi. So I do have questions, and yeah, it's based on the video that I heard before. It said that Duolingo is really counting on grammatical accuracy, complexity, and lexical precisely. And yeah, previously I had experienced Duolingo and TOEFL IPT, and also learn from TOEFL IPT prep. And the teacher, they give me a feedback to like if you are not mastering the you know um if you are not mastering the grammar, just try to use the grammar that you can correctly uh say it like the simple grammar, but it's all correct, all correct. Or which one is better? Is it better to try complex grammar, but maybe a little bit wrong in some part, or it is better just do like yeah, my teacher said.
Yeah, I think this is a hard question because it depends on how complex the grammar and how big of a mistake you make, right? So I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have a direct answer for you. I would encourage you to do your best. So that means don't be overly concerned about keeping everything very simple. If you kind of consciously cut yourself short, you may run out of content. And I think that is probably the worst for these open-ended questions. What we would really like to see is really you generating your own content and response, and you being able to explain a concept, ideally a complicated concept, to someone who doesn't understand. So it's understandable that you make small mistakes, but don't overly censor yourself to have the content be too simple. I think that would hurt you even more. So I would say, the ideal situation is you use very diverse types of sentences and vocabulary. One good trick is to rephrase different ideas, use different ways to explain things clearer, use examples. So don't hold yourself back.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you so much. Maybe I really still have time. I just all right. So maybe one last question, maybe from directly again from Unail Bima Sakti Putra Yusuf. Please.
Yes, I'm here. Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you for this platform. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Bima from University of Duolinggo. So I have a question about the Duolingo English test itself. Is it okay during the test if I suddenly close my eyes to think or say it out loud the question in order to understand the question itself? Will it affect my certificate? Because sometimes I do that unconsciously. Thank you.
Yeah. Usually, with most questions, after you see it, there is about 32 minutes of time when you are given time to prepare. And you will see it will say, please start the sentence, and there's a countdown clock. So you'll have plenty of time to prepare and review the question. And when you review the question, you're welcome to prepare in any way you need to.
Okay, that's really helpful for me. I guess that's all for me. Thank you.
All right. Melly, I think there's one. There are too many questions that I'm sorry we cannot address all of them. There's one comment I want to make in general about breaking rules. I see that many students have questioned about how to avoid being disqualified, how to avoid breaking rules. This is why in Ross's presentation, we really emphasize talking about rules and security and ways to kind of stay in the right when it comes to rules. First of all, I want all students to have this framework or this mental model before you start an online test. your room is the same as the testing center. Treat this room, even if it's your bedroom, it's your living room, but treat it with the same attitude that you would when you go into a physical exam room. Even though there's no teacher, you can imagine there's a teacher watching over you at all times. This will help you get into the right mental stage to take an online exam. Please remember, this exam is just as rigorous and high stakes as any other exam you would take in a test center, and this is the guideline that our proctors will use when they review your online exam recording, both the video and the audio. I would say for very specific questions you have about rules, you can go to our website, and on the website there is a help button that's in orange, and for most times during the day there is actually live customer support who are there to answer your questions. So if you're uncertain, please go and ask them questions. You will be connected to a real person, a real customer support agent, and they will be able to answer the specific situation you are in. I will say a couple of things. The top 4 rules that Ross has reminded you, I have to remind you again. Number 1 is to make sure that you really stay focused on the screen and that you don't look away, because if you look away to a specific location repeated times, our proctors may suspect that you're consulting external help or external material. For example, you may have a book, or you may have someone holding up answers for you in a specific direction. So please remember to look at the video and to help us ensure that you are generating the content and the answer yourself. Another very important rule is to close all programs. This may be easy to forget because we often have many programs open on our computer. We have websites. You maybe have communication or chat apps like WhatsApp. You may have grammar correction apps like Grammarly. Please turn those off, because those will count as consulting external resources and may result in your test not being qualified. Another very important thing is to make sure that no one comes into your room. We've had many parents walk into the exam in the middle of the exam, or cell phones go off. Unfortunately, even if you don't talk to them for a long time, even if you don't answer your phone, because there's an external disturbance, we have to be fair and we will have to disqualify this current test. Now, I've listed some examples. I talked about disqualification. In most cases, we understand that people make mistakes and you are very well intentioned. It's not your fault and you're not trying to cheat. That's why in many cases, when you get disqualified, actually Duolingo English test will give you a free test credit. This means even though this current exam is not certified, you don't get a score, but we recognize you made a careless mistake. For example, a parent came in, and if you go back to the website where you purchased the test, you will automatically see a free credit, meaning you can take the exam once more. And please make sure you don't make the same mistake again. So that's everything I want to share about test rules. I think we are out of time for other questions.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So we'll back to our MC, Pak Denny. Pak Dedi. Pak Dedi Araha, please.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Carrie Wong, and also Ms. Noviana for the Q&A sessions. It's very fruitful. So many students asking lots of questions. I believe that if we answer all of that, it will take a lot of time. That's why we need to wrap up everything. That's why I'm asking students to write down the questions and also record for us so we can share all these questions to you. But maybe we'll create some video to help the students to answer all of the difficulties when they want to do the Duolingo test. And to all students here, I would like to remind everyone to fill the presence form. Yeah, to make sure that when you type your questions, and we also can find your details. So if the Duolingo choose you for the door prize, we can send the prize to you directly. Okay, thank you so much, Cherry Wang, for all of the information, for sharing for this afternoon, and also Fiona for assisting us and then make these sessions happen. Thank you so much for everything. And also to the students that will join ISMA 2023, try hard and then learn English well, yeah. And the most important thing is you learn the tips and tricks that Mr. Roston already shared to us. And don't forget, this session is recording, so if any of you want to have the record so you can learn more at home, you can send your request to us, and then we will gladly give the recording to you. And also, you may inform to your university if you have further applications for Duolingo, you can contact us. So Duolingo will have another sessions in your university as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Aaron, for the time and opportunity for us, and also for Fiona. So we already reached the end of our sessions. Thanks again. Here I counted there are more than 500 participants joining the sessions. It's beyond our expectations. We really wish for another partnership with Duolingo, and I hope that we can reach more university that will accept Duolingo test as the requirement. Okay, I think that's all for me. Yeah, we can have a picture together with all the students, so you may open your camera so we can capture this beautiful moment. Okay, this is the potential student for ISMA 4 2023, am I right? How excited you are to join ISMA 4 2023 with Duolingo as your proficiency test for your English competency. Let's get some reactions. Okay, this is mine. Okay. Are you ready for the picture? Okay, very nice. Okay, I will take a picture. Okay, for page 1, you ready? Give me your beautiful smile, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Okay, next page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, next page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I just take 3 pages from more than 20 pages. So if I take more pictures, I believe it will wasting our time.